Peace and welcome to the culture right here on the Black Star Network. Folks, we got a great show for you today. First, let's talk about the latest that's happening in Russia and Ukraine. We're going to be checking in with Dr. Gerald Horne to talk to us about that. Also, black voters are showing a sign of decline in support of President Biden. There are some big elections happening today, and we'll talk about what black voters are expecting from the Biden administration and what we're not receiving. We'll have that discussion. And then let's certainly talk a little bit about education. We're going to check in with Dr. Sonia Santelises, the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools, to give us the latest about how educating black children are impacted given the time of racism and all of these other social justice issues. We'll have that conversation. And then later, Monique and DL Hughley are at it again. But Monique does something that got the whole internet asking the question, why, Monique? Why? We have that conversation. So stay with us. It's all happening on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. So happy to join for you to join us today. We got a lot to get to, so let's jump right in it. Yesterday, we started a little bit of the conversation around the latest that's happening within the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Well, today we wanted to make sure that we have a little bit more details and more analysis from our foreign policy expert, who is a professor of history and African American studies at the University of Houston, Professor Dr. Gerald Horne, to talk to us a little bit about what we're seeing right now as fighting in Ukraine continues to escalate, where missiles are being launched at the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv. There are more casualties for the Ukrainian soldiers as well as the Russian soldiers, and there are a number of questions about how to bring this conflict to an end. So let's bring Dr. Gerald Horne into this discussion. Doc, thank you so much for being back with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, Doc. So one of the big things that I saw today is the fact that, there was a discussion about Russian envoys first storming out of the UN meeting amid allegations that Russia has weaponized rape and food issues in Ukraine. Take a look at this, folks. This is the big talk right now, that Russian soldiers are using sexual assault as a form of keeping of diminishing and pretty much destroying any type of hope for the Ukrainian people. Doc, what is this all about?
Well, first of all, with regard to the sexual violence charge, we should approach that with caution. As you know, there is an old saying that truth is so precious in war that it has to be accompanied by a bodyguard of lies. And you may know that just a few days ago, the human rights coordinator in Ukraine was dismissed precisely because she was telling falsehoods with regard to that precise issue. Now, I cannot claim to have insight into the latest reports about sexual violence, but it's only a cautionary note. Second of all, with regard to food, this is where Africa comes into play. As you may know, just a few days ago, the president of Senegal, Macky Sall, also the titular head of the African Union, headquartered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, traveled to Mr. Putin's summer residence in Sochi, Russia, where he made a particular plea to the man that he called, quote, my dear friend Vladimir, unquote, to do something about the release of grain exports, not only from Ukraine, but from Russia, because there have been food riots and unrest, particularly in Egypt, which is heavily dependent for bread that is based upon wheat exports from that part of Europe. Now, that is relevant, I think, to our audience, because as I think we've mentioned on this program before, Congressional Black Caucus leader Gregory Meeks, congressman from Southeast Queens, New York, who also happens to be chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, one of the most powerful committees on Capitol Hill, has carried legislation that would punish African nations who refuse to join the sanctions crusade against Russia. Now, as you know, more than most, many African nations feel that this is a European fight. They're not clear as to why a European problem has suddenly become a world problem that African leaders have to take a position on. As you know, South Africa, perhaps the leading country on the continent, has been particularly reluctant to get involved in this sanctions crusade. And when you look at the vote expelling Russia from the Human Rights Council of the United Nations, a significant percentage of African nations basically did not stand with the United States as its North Atlantic allies. And I think that this has something to do with the fact not only that African nations are really upset with the hypocrisy in the North Atlantic nations, that is to say that the North Atlantic nations violate a United Nations resolution to overthrow Gaddafi in Libya about a decade ago. The United Nations is also not capable of stopping NATO from dismembering Yugoslavia under President Bill Clinton. And so they're wondering if there is a double standard that is at play in the international community, where there's one standard for the North Atlantic nations and another standard for everyone else. African nations who have not been long in their escape from the clutches of colonialism take this issue very seriously. And I think that our audience should take it seriously too.
So and with that concern, I think my biggest concern is this whole conversation around wheat production, the distribution of wheat, and getting it to these African nations, and how this is going to play out. What is that? What is America doing? What is the Biden-Harris administration doing, as far as you know, to address that issue, to make sure that the food shortage doesn't become a severe situation for those African countries that depend on it?
Well, as you know, food is heavily dependent upon fuel. There are some estimates that food prices are contingent in the range of 50% on fuel prices. And as we know, fuel prices are going through the roof, not only gasoline at the pump, but diesel, and also the fuel that transports the ships that would carry the wheat into Africa and North Africa in particular. The Biden administration would argue that they're trying to bring down the price of fuel. That underlies the reported trip of Mr. Biden to Saudi Arabia, where he plans to twist the arm of the de facto leader, Mohammed bin Salman, to get the Saudis to pump more petroleum, which presumably will bring down the price of fuel, and therefore will have knock-on effects with regard to bringing down the price of food. The problem there is that Mr. Biden can be charged with hypocrisy, not only because supposedly he had made a promise during his campaign to become president to make a pariah out of Saudi Arabia because of the war it has inflicted upon neighboring Yemen, because of the Saudis' dastardly role in the butchering of a Washington Post journalist and Saudi national, Jamal Khashoggi. And then he's being charged with hypocrisy because as we speak, there is a summit of the Americas unfolding in Los Angeles, supposedly involving all the nations from this hemisphere, from Canada down to Argentina. But Mr. Biden made sure that Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela were not invited, supposedly because of their purported human rights violations. Well, then Mr. Biden's critics then say, well, what about the human rights violations in Saudi Arabia? Does this mean you're a hypocrite? And Mr. Biden does not have a credible answer in response.
And I mean, that's the concerning part. That's the concerning part. We've been saying, Dr. Horn, and you've been kind of sounding the horn on this, that throughout this whole conflict, when it comes to African students, African people that are impacted by this conflict, that we have been seeing. It seems like the administration, the Biden-Harris administration, or any other administration, everybody seems to be closed-lipped when it comes to the suffering and the pain and the impact of this conflict on the African people. And I'm wondering what will have to happen in order to get people to see that suffering, to understand that is another human rights violation, not just what's happening in Ukraine or what's happening in Russia, but what's happening in countries that are depending upon the resources and the capacities of Ukraine and Russia. What will have to happen in order for there to be a much stronger voice around those human rights violations?
Well, that is the plaintive cry coming from Africa as we speak, which you have just articulated. As I suggested a moment or two ago, the African nations are wondering why it is that there needs to be global concern with regard to a conflict in Europe, why it is that Haitian migrants on the Texas-Mexico border are roughhoused and manhandled, whereas the United States under President Biden has called for the admission of 100,000 refugees from Ukraine. Why is it that influential New York Times columnist Bret Stephens has suggested that every Ukrainian who entered the United States be given a green card, which would allow these refugees to receive social welfare benefits? Others are wondering why it is that corporations like Airbnb have provided free housing to Ukrainian refugees. They have not lifted a finger with regard to providing free housing to Haitian refugees. And so your question goes to the nub of the question. That is to say, when is it that this administration in Washington, which Mr. Biden, by his own admission, was placed into office because of Black votes, when will that be reciprocated? And I've noticed that in a subsequent segment on this program, you're going to be dealing with a lack of enthusiasm concerning Black voters concerning this important election day, June 7, 2022. And this may have something to do with this very question we're discussing at the moment.
Absolutely. I want to go take some comments from our watchers here, folks, from YouTube, Keenan. So we want to just get to a couple of comments as we take a few more moments with Dr. Gerald Horne to talk to us about the latest. Janelle Fields. Janelle, it's always good to hear from you, sis. She said, there is absolutely a double standard. This is not new. We live in an imperialistic, WS nation that has never had any real love for any nation led by Black or brown skin. Yeah, this is an imperialistic nation. And I'm wondering, Dr. Horne, that seems to be the ongoing philosophy. We know that America often goes into international affairs, thinking that they're going to control the narrative. They're going to, take charge of the situation. You think that that's the mindset of President Biden at this point, or is he, or are we looking at that incorrectly?
No, I don't think you're looking at it incorrectly at all. In fact, I would say it's not only the mindset of Mr. Biden, it's the mindset of those campaign donors who provided millions in order for him to run an election campaign and are funding the Democrats going forward for November 2022 and for November 2024. I think there's a structural problem in the United States of America. I dare say that even if we were able, by some stroke of magic, to put Farajii Muhammad in the White House, even a person as progressive as yourself, without some sort of radical structural change, would have difficulty in breaking the bonds of white supremacy, believe it or not, because it's baked into the cake. And it's going to be very difficult to do something about it absent a mass movement that has global support.
Absolutely. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Let me go to Janae. I'm sorry, Jimmy. Let's go to Jimmy Davis. Jimmy posted a comment. He said something I think that we need to take in consideration. And Jimmy, I couldn't agree with you more. You say we just can't watch Western news and get the whole story. I don't. I watch, I read more than I watch television. So I read Reuters. I read Associated Press, of course, but Al Jazeera. I go into some of the news media for the UK. I mean, you have to watch all over the place, and I think that speaks volumes, Dr. Horne, about the fact that again, we're talking about this narrative around it. There has been a lot of the news platforms have used their platforms to create a semblance of support for the Ukrainian nation, for Ukraine. But then, of course, it's spaces like this that we have to sound the alarm to say, hey, Ukraine isn't the only one that's being impacted here. And I think that's something that we just can't, we have to drive that point home to, especially to Black people in this country. We need to keep our eyes on the things that the news aren't watching, or isn't watching, excuse me.
Absolutely. And let me add to your list, allafrica.com, which covers the continent and also has been reflecting African opinion with regard to Ukraine, Russia conflict. Indeed, some of the best items, some of the best reportage concerning how African students in Ukraine were manhandled on the Poland-Ukraine border, you could find to this very day on allafrica.com. And I would also point to the Herald from Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, as you know, has gotten a hard time from the United States. It's under sanctions as we speak. And so therefore it has no illusions about the United States, nor does it have illusions about the North Atlantic bloc, because it's under sanctions by London and Australia as well. So there are many different outlets that we can pursue, that we can skim and scan in order to get a fuller picture. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not include on that list Black Star News.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to get a couple of comments in before we end this conversation today. Let's go to, I think it's Shakia. Shakia Y posted, shame on those African nations that didn't make food a priority. I think Shakia brings up a great point here, Dr. Horn. In light of, now we're over 100 days since this conflict had started back in February. Do you think that African leaders did the best that they could to prepare African nations for the impact of food shortages and other resources being cut off as a result of this conflict? Did they do what they needed to do? Did they make food a priority?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer in light of the fact that hindsight is always 2020. I think it's fair to say that one of the problems in Africa right now is desertification. That is to say, the Sahara Desert is spreading slowly but surely southward, which makes it very difficult to grow crops in a good deal of Africa. And therefore, when it puts strain on agriculture in Niger, it then has ricocheting effects, because then Niger has to be more dependent and reliant not only on exports from Africa, but also from exports from its neighbors to the south. And so there are some real structural impediments. But having said that, I think it's fair to say that as of January, if not December, we had a premonition that there would be a conflict in Ukraine. And if I were sitting in the presidential mansion in Cairo, Egypt, that's what I would have been telling General al-Sisi, that perhaps you should try to secure some alternative food supplies, because your food supplies from Ukraine and Russia may be blocked because of an impending conflict.
Oh, absolutely. I want to get one more comment from McCole Spicer. McCole, good to hear from you, sis. McCole posted something that I think that we should keep in mind as we have these discussions. One is that she said, I hope that all is well with me. I hope that we continue to pay attention to the Russia-Ukraine war. It is affecting all of us, our economics, our food, our politics, etc. It seems like a war is actually being waged, and I love how McCole put this, like it is affecting all of us, Dr. Horn. It's like this thing is happening. Money is being spent. Military supplies are being distributed. We have elected officials that are going across the waters, both Republicans and Democrats going across the waters to shore up its support for Ukraine and NATO allies. I mean, all of this stuff is happening, but it feels like it's not happening, right? You know what I mean? Like all of these decisions are being made, and it feels like, okay, are we in a war? Are we like intimately a part of this situation? And we are, but it still doesn't, it doesn't. I remember when President Bush declared war on Saddam Hussein in Iraq. You know, when he came and did that presidential address from the White House, and he, the talk about the campaign of shock and all. I mean, there was this feeling like, okay, America is all in. This feels like we're all in, but then it doesn't feel like we're all in. We feel the brunt of it from gas prices to food prices and from our politics, but then it still doesn't feel like we're all in. We're kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Am I going crazy in that feeling?
No, I think you're onto something. And I think part of the problem is that unlike previous wars, you mentioned the Bush war in Iraq, there was a large and substantial anti-war movement. You might recall there were tens of thousands marching.
Right. Yes,
that
sir.
gives you an idea that something important is happening. When you have protests, people being arrested, people being battered by police officers in the process, etc. Sadly and unfortunately, there's no mass protests against this conflict in Iraq. To use one example, and I'm not singling her out, if you look at Congresswoman Barbara Lee of Oakland, Berkeley, a stalwart member of the Congressional Black Caucus, she stood virtually alone in 2001 in voting against the war with Afghanistan. She was denounced. She was excoriated. With this conflict, she's actually accompanied Speaker Nancy Pelosi to the battlefield of Ukraine and has voted for all of these appropriations. So this helps to induce a certain kind of lethargy on the part of our community. They don't feel that there's anything important, anything worth protesting, because they don't see any protests in the streets. And so in some ways, what we're witnessing and what we're reflecting about is a severe and sad commentary on the peace movement in this country.
Absolutely. Great way to end today's conversation. Dr. Gerald Horne, thank you for coming back again, joining us to talk about this. And we'll certainly bring you back next week to give us some more analysis and updates. Thank you, dear brother.
Thank you.
Dr. Gerald Horne, you're welcome. Dr. Gerald Horne, Moore's Professor of History and African American Studies at the University of Houston, joining us once again. Folks, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's have a conversation about how Black confidence and Black support of the Biden-Harris administration is diminishing. We got big elections happening today, from the state of Iowa to the big state of California. Los Angeles has a major mayoral election that's taking place today. And, I'm representing Black voters. Black voters matter. So here's the thing. What do we do about it? What does the Biden-Harris administration do about it? How do we make sure that our voice is heard when we go to the ballot box this year? We'll have that conversation. Then at the 4 o'clock hour, we check in with the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools, Dr. Sonia Santelises, to give us the latest about educating Black students in this new educational landscape. So we'll have all of that and more. Stay with us. It's The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful. New, unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group, It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience as we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third Reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
Folks, there's a new poll that shows that Black voter support for President Biden is diminishing. According to this new poll that was done by the Washington Post, they found that there was a number of people who are feeling less enthusiastic about the president. Let me just share with you, Keena, let's post some of the data from this poll that the Washington Post had conducted, the Washington Post Ipsen poll that was done, where a number of Black Democrats prefer Biden as the 2024 nominee. Here's a couple of things to keep in mind. In the 2024 presidential election, who would you prefer to be the Democratic Party nominee for president? 43% said President Biden, 29% for Kamala Harris, 7% for Pete Buttigieg, and then for Bernie Sanders, Michelle Obama, and others, it goes down. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Here's another thing to keep in mind, folks, that 6 out of 10, check this out, folks, 6 out of 10 people and Black Americans say the president is keeping most of his campaign promises, but more than 1/3 say he is not. Look at the numbers there. 60% of Black folks say, yes, he's keeping it. 37% is saying no. In contrast to all Americans, who 40% who are saying, yes, he's keeping most of his promises, and 56% say no as well. I want to bring in Culture Crew, our Culture Crew for the day, Lise Winnie, who is host of Millennials Anonymous podcast, and Iman Heem, who is an entrepreneur and activist. Lise, Iman, good to talk to you ladies today. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. Iman, how are you, sis?
I'm doing good, I can hear you and see you, so I'm doing good.
Good. That's always a blessing. That's always a blessing. So when we look at this poll, Lise, what do you get from this? I mean, Black folks are still in strong support of Democrats. It doesn't, even though this poll is saying that there is some decline, it doesn't mean that Black folks has abandoned the Democratic ship just yet. But when it comes to this midterm elections, and the other thing that Washington Post Ipsen poll said, that younger Black Americans are way less enthusiastic about the midterms or the presidential election, that they may not come out to vote. What do you take from that?
I mean, that's typically what happens. Younger voters are always less enthusiastic to vote unless there's something really big on the table. So it's not necessarily surprising. I'm actually more surprised that those numbers were as strong as they were. There's still 43% of them, Black voters, us, we still want to see Joe Biden run again, even given all the things that are happening. So I'm actually quite shocked. Now, his poll numbers in general have not been over 50% since October 2021. So I think that there is some decline in Democrats because when you are in office, you're always on the defense. And that's what Democrats have to stand for: crime. They have to speak up for crime and the fact that there's been a lack of real police reform and change and all of these things. And now you have the pandemic and we're still kind of in it. So all of those things that Democrats have to stand for, and they have to get people out to vote. And I'm actually quite shocked that we have not seen them put anything on the table that will bring people out. I mean, of course, people are afraid of what will happen if they reverse Roe. But again, no real marijuana on the federal level. We haven't really seen Biden go there yet. And that's something that would be a bipartisan thing. So we'll see what happens, especially today, when you look at California and those races, and we will definitely see what will happen. And I think in Virginia, they're neck and neck what Democrats actually decide to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Iman, there are a couple of key issues that are pertinent for our people when it comes to the Biden-Harris administration: police reform, voting rights, and now gun control. We can also try to throw in there abortion rights as well. Big ticket items affect Black people the most, right? And yet we haven't seen the president deliver on these issues: police reform, voting rights, gun control, abortion rights. Do you feel like this is the beginning of the end for the Biden-Harris administration and its support, and for Democrats when it comes to its relationship with Black folk?
I slowly but surely feel as though this is the end of how Black Americans handle politics and politicians in general. I think, especially with young voters not being so enthusiastic about voting, we've lost the, hope or promise in believing in politicians when they say they're going to do something for us and it doesn't get done. Now, having the experience of seeing it over and over again is okay. We're not and no offense to any baby boomers, but we're not the generation where, okay, we're just going to go along with what you're telling me you're going to do or what's going to be okay, or we may see this face, may see that face. No. I think young Black voters are going to hold politicians accountable for what they say they're going to do. Because again, as I know I've been saying since the culture has started, what about the student loan debt forgiveness?
Yeah, we can put that down.
That was the biggest support, or the biggest part for young Black voters that got Biden in office. Where are the results, sir? You keep pushing back the date that we have to pay on the loans. That helps in a way, but it's not what you promised.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I mean, so even the $10,000 student loan cancellation is not enough in your eyes, Iman? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely not. $10,000 out of, and you have to think of the institutions people have gone to. I've seen some people student loan debt up to $70,000, $60,000. Okay, cool. That it will help. I'm not saying it won't help. However, that's not going to move your credit score, but so much, to be honest.
Right. And so here's Keenan. Let's post this quote that about the roughly 9 in 10 Black voters supported President Biden. Take a look at this, folks. I want y'all to just think about this very quickly. This Washington Post Ipsen poll said that roughly 9 in 10 Black voters say they would vote for the Democratic candidate in House election. If the election for the U.S. House of Representatives was being held today, would you vote for the Democratic candidate or the Republican candidate in your congressional district? 88% said overwhelmingly yes. But then there's another part about this where it also says that roughly 9 in 10 Black voters supported President Biden in the 2020 election. But according to this poll, more than 1,200 Black Americans this spring finds what appeared to be diminishing the support. 7 in 10 approve of President Biden's job performance, and fewer than one quarter strongly approve. So a 60% majority of Black Americans say that he's doing a good job. So when you look at the dynamics of all of these things, Lise, and the fact that we're still in the middle of a situation. We're still in the middle of we're still in a pandemic. We're still talking about inflation. We're still talking about there's a big conversation like all of the other conversations. Now we're putting reparations on the table. I'm just not sure if we're going to get. I'm wondering where are the wins in this whole situation, Lise? Where do we get the strong win? I'm not talking about the Pyrrhic victories, the moral wins. I'm talking about policy wins from this Biden-Harris administration. Because I it's kind of hard to. I mean, every time Black folks issue come up, you know, the leak up from the Supreme Court happened. Then we got these mass shootings. And we're not talking about mass shootings or the number of shootings of gun control as it relates to the Black community. That's a different conversation. We're planning to have that conversation on this show. But then you got that. Then you got, of course, inflation. Like, where do Black people interest? Where do we get our win in?
Yeah, I think that if you start to really look at the issues that Black people have and you actually talk to Black people as a whole, you will start to realize, I think that Black people aren't a monolith. I think that that's a big issue and a problem that we hear in media, and we also hear from politicians. That if you ask a lot of African Americans, what are your pain points right now? They're going to say that gas is too high, stuff costs too much. Unfortunately, we tend to go down the things that are far left that don't necessarily get people excited to vote. And so we need to start really thinking about what's impacting people from day to day. I think that's where the wins come from, where Democrats and Republicans both are not feeling or vibing this inflation. We're not imbibing costs. And I think that if Democrats can start to pass things that people actually want, we will see some of those things actually get through. Will it be hard? Yes, because Republicans are trying to win back power. And the only way to do that is the way that they've been doing it for years, is to stonewall everything. If we don't pass it, they can't get a win. And that's what we're going to see. But I think overall, like I said, if Democrats, like you mentioned student loans, although student loans is something that Biden and, you know, he really did go after and say that this is something he would do like on day one, and it has not really gotten done. Now, he has forgiven a lot of for-profit colleges. We're talking about billions. It might be up to $1 trillion. Like, it's a lot of, well, not trillion. I think it's a couple $1 billion that he's actually forgiven for for-profit colleges. But we also have to look at who has been impacted the most by those: Black women. So Black people are also suffering, you know, with student loans, and we need to put those types of things on the ballot. And it doesn't seem to happen. We seem to get stuck on the only thing that Black people want is criminal justice reform. And that's not true. So we do need to look at it, I think, bigger. And I think Democrats need to do that as well.
And Lise, we can't even get a win on that.
True.
I mean, we can't even get a win on police reform right now.
True.
Because it's not hot. It's not hot. It's not mass shootings have taken over the conversation, and rightfully so. Mm-hmm. But it's like the country has gone through a you know, what do they call that? You know, schizophrenia.
But it's also crime.
You know what I'm saying? You're just moving from one thing to the next. You're being reactionary and not giving and not saying, okay, we know this is issue. We're going to address this issue. We got to say something about this issue.
Right.
We're still working. We're still cooking. You know what I mean? Like it's like this country only want to focus on one issue. Like, bro, this is why this government was created the way it was, because it means that you can focus on 4 or 5 different things at one time. And you mean to tell me that, and to your point, Lise, like, no, we're not monolithic. So you mean to tell me that we can't, while we're talking about mass shootings, let's get something some movement on voting. While we're talking about abortion rights, let's get some movement on police reform. You know, this is an election year. Mm-hmm. We don't even have a strong win on voting rights.
That's
you know
true.
what I'm saying? So,
that's true. But to your point with police reform, when you have high crime, and crime has been through the roof, it is going to be very hard for you to pass police reform when crime is so high. We have to be able to address that first, because Democrats, that's a win for Republicans. Look at crime. Look at what the liberals have done. And so we also have a fight within our own party. You have liberals against conservative Democrats, and it's just an infight. So there's a lot at play here. So I think that we do need to look at that as a large. How do we address the crime in the United States while also addressing police reform, which your guess is as good as mine, because I think...
Hey, no, wait, let me tell you something. This is what I believe in. Folks, y'all can think I'm wrong. And Iman, I want to get your take on this very quickly. You want to address the crime problem? Look at creating opportunities where people can have better lives. Don't just look at it from, okay, we got to get guns off the street, we got to get more police. Look at it from the vantage point of, okay, how is crime, why crime is so high?
Let me jump in.
Go ahead, jump in. I'm just throwing it out there.
We say get guns off the street. Let's think about why guns are on the street. Most of the time, these young, and as far as in Baltimore I see, these young black men are being killed is because, hey, you're taking food or money from what I have going on for you to benefit, but you're not going to take my money or take my ends meet because I have children and family to feed. So I'm going to get rid of you. I'm going to eliminate my issue. The root of violence is most likely, and I'm going to bet my last dollar that it's poverty. It starts from the root. Less opportunity, less money. I'm going to make sure you don't eat before my kids go hungry. What did he say? From Philly, I'm gonna snatch the dishes out your kitchen before my kids can't eat. Like,
you're talking about Beanie Siegel.
There we go.
Right.
You know who said it. So it's we have to get to the root. To say snatch the guns, they'll come right back. And who was bringing the guns in the community? We don't have any boats. We're not flying planes. Like, let's think beyond the surface or what this film they put in front of us to say, hey, this is the issue. Let's redirect something else. No, the problem is poverty. Poverty breeds violence. It's really that simple. Of course, there are variables, but it's that simple.
But you're talking about socialism. There's no way a capitalist nation is going to fix poverty. You cannot fix.
Exactly. Because there's no benefit to fixing that, especially police reform, because there's no benefit, it's not going to change. So this goes back to us as young black voters holding these politicians accountable on every level as much as possible, especially locally.
Look, let me just tell y'all something. Telling me you're going to fight crime as your campaign promise, like I'm going to drop crime, that don't appeal to me. Telling me you're going to provide some jobs, you can get some positive activities for these smaller children. Telling me like we're working from the negative space rather than from the positive space. And I'm tired of hearing I'm just tired of hearing the rhetoric. I don't want to go, you going hard on crime. Go hard on cultivating people. Go hard on positive reinforcement. Go hard on making sure that people don't feel like they have to pull out the gun in order to survive. You know what I mean? Like create conditions that will allow people to feel like they're cared for in some way, shape, or form, right? That's all I'm asking. And to your point, Lise, we do live in a capitalist system. And I know some of y'all probably be like, man, Farajii, you always kind of pushing on this capitalism. It's not working.
At all.
It just doesn't work and I'm saying this from the vantage point of the number of people we have in this country, which is over 320-something million people in this country, the number of interests that we have, everybody is asking. I'm talking about groups of people, whether you're talking about Asian Americans, Latinos, Black folks, white people. You got so many different groups of people with varying interests. Capitalism, this idea of pull up your own bootstraps, make money on your own. Like, this is an outdated system. This is an outdated idea, right? Because you're not able to grab people in. You can't say to pull up your bootstraps. You can't say, oh, you can.
Some people don't got boots. Some people don't even have straps.
Not even just even boots. You don't even have the access to go to the damn store. You don't. How you gonna get to the store? You're trying to, the store down the street, and you keep telling people just be great and keep working in the system. The system is not working for us. And I'm saying that because there's just a lot of people in this country that are suffering. If you got a small, very small, minuscule amount of people at the top, and you got this huge number of people at the bottom, that's an indication that whatever ideology or philosophy you're using, it doesn't work.
But I think that I'm sorry, I'll say that you have to change, but what we're talking about, if you're really talking about actually changing stuff, this is like fairy tales, what we're talking about. At the end of the day, you're talking about mindset. No, we're talking about changing mindset. If we have, and let's take Baltimore, they have so many nonprofits. Do you know how many go unused? It's a change of mindset. We have to start there. So I guess making mental health a priority and all of those types of things have to go first. And it's hard to take capitalism from people who don't have it, because this dream that one day I want to sit there. It's not necessarily that people don't want capitalism. They just want to trade places. So we do need to be able to change the mindset in where we are as a nation. And that is a harder thing to do. You can give people 50 after school activities. You can give them money. You can throw money at them. It's not going to change a thing. So we do need to have to start with the mindset first and then work that way.
I'm a whole advocate for it, and that's why I got to wrap up this part of the conversation. But really quickly, here's why I say that the system needs to change. Because if you have a billionaire running in Los Angeles, Mr. Caruso, billionaire developer, right? He running against a Representative Karen Bass, a congressperson, right, for LA mayor. Mm-hmm. The thing is, we have this mindset that wealthy people have all the answers. That's not true. They don't have all the answers. They know how to get themselves from one place to change their station in life. But just because you got money doesn't mean you know what the hell you're doing. You know how to get money, but do you know how to serve people? And that's two different things. Like we want to believe so badly, Iman, that if you're rich and you have a heart and you have a conscience, and I'm not saying rich people don't have conscience or hearts, they do. But at the end of the day, this country is so lopsided, we're so imbalanced that we focus so much on the rich thing that we lose sight of the human side of the equation. And that's the part I want us to look at, is like, at the end of the day, no, everybody can't be Jay-Z, everybody can't be a billionaire, everybody can't be a millionaire. But guess what? We can be somebody if you treat us with respect, with fairness, if you give a livable wage, if you educate our children correctly, all of these things. So I know this is a big conversation. We're gonna have to stop it here, but it's just this indicator with President Biden. I think it's a great opportunity for us to look en masse at the system and say something has to be done before the 2024 election. There's got to be some revolution in this country against what we're currently experiencing right now.
Absolutely. Because the system is shit.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
It's that simple.
No, I gotta take a quick pause. When we come back, let's switch gears. Let's talk about educating Black children in America today. We're going to be checking in with the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools, Dr. Sonia Santelises, to give us her take on what it means to educate Black students. So stay with us. That conversation is coming up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back to the second hour of the culture here on Black Star on the Black Star Network. We have been having a number of great conversations, and we wanted to have a discussion not only about what's going on from mass shootings and looking at the state of the Black vote, but we wanted to have a conversation about education, especially when you're talking about educating Black students in this new space, in this very different space, in a time when mass shootings are happening, in a time where teaching Black history, teaching about Black heroes and sheroes is a problem, is a controversy. What do we do? How do you make sure that Black students get the most out of their educational experience? And so we wanted to have this conversation, and we thought the best person to have this conversation with is the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools, Dr. Sonia Santelises, to give us some insight as to what she has been experiencing, what is she seeing on the educational landscape as we have these important conversations. So we'd like to welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network, the CEO, Dr. Sonia Santelises. Dr. Santelises, thank you so much for joining us. How are you feeling this afternoon? Oh, wait a minute. We got you on mute. There we go.
There we go. I'm doing all
right. There we go.
Is that better?
Yep, much better. How are you, Doc?
Well, I'm doing well this week because it's graduation week, which is one of the
awesome
best times of the year. But, you know, it's been a rough year, but we're doing well. We're doing well.
It's a very, very rough year. In a few moments, we're going to bring in back our culture crew, Lise Winnie and Iman Heath, to be a part of this conversation. But, Doc, I wanted to first thank you so much for taking time out your busy schedule to have these conversations with us, because I think a lot of people, and like you mentioned, we're at the end of the year, but a lot of people are very concerned about the state of education for Black students in this country, right? Like, how do you create a safe space for Black students if they feel afraid? How do we make sure that Black students' identity is constantly affirmed in the curriculum? So let's start with looking at having a conversation about racism in the schools, considering what just happened in Buffalo with that situation, with that tragedy. You know, has the school system, from your vantage point, has it changed? What's being done to teach Black students that racism exists, that people are still out there that may want to hurt you? How do you have those conversations with children?
So I think first, one of the things that we prioritized, and actually it was one of the benefits, Farajii, I think, of the virtual year, was we prioritized creating space in schools, right? Space in the day. So we have advisory periods, morning meetings that we have across the district, because one of the things we found was that young people were telling us, like, where actually is the space for me to be able to discuss when things like a Buffalo happen, right? Or frankly, in Baltimore City, what happens when we have 12 to 13 students under the age of 18 shot and killed in a school year, right? And so regardless of how the racism is manifesting or the discussion is happening, what we found was that space. And what teachers said to us is not all of them feel as equipped to navigate those conversations. So, you know, some of it is figuring out what's the training, and we've worked with our executive director for equity, Dr. Durant, in some of that work. But, you know, it takes time to lift it, Farajii. And I think part of it is making sure that, one, we're giving the space, and we're also giving the hope alongside of it. And I think that's one of the charges that I feel more profoundly now that we're back in school than I even did before COVID, right? And before George Floyd. And like one of the things I tell people when that was happening is Baltimore City had its version of a response that actually signaled for the rest of the country what happened subsequent to that in the middle of, right, a once in 100-year, actual physical health crisis. So all of that happening at once, number one is like young people need space to process it, and they also need space to process that with people who know how to have those conversations. And there's varying comfort levels, like across teachers and school psychologists and, all those other professionals around like how you have those conversations with young people. And then I think something else that you alluded to was we had a much bigger push from students to say, we want even more of our history, our place in this country, represented in what we're studying. And so it is a balance. And I definitely push this. It's a balance in knowing, yes, there's a history of redlining. Yes, we know kind of the need to teach the period of Reconstruction in a more truthful and full way. But, we also need to teach the hope next to the pain, right? Because if it's only pain, when young people are experiencing pain in their community, then we're actually seeing, I think, an increased epidemic of hopelessness. And so the skillfulness of teachers to be able to do both is not something everybody automatically has. And so we've done things like, we have a school this year piloting, one of the few in the country piloting an AP Black History program, because kids said it wasn't enough just to integrate it sometimes. They wanted coursework where they could go deep in their particular history. Our Be More Me curriculum that we developed in-house with our teachers tells the stories of the untold side of Baltimore's history, which tends to be Black people, brown people, immigrant folks. And so that showing up is also done with, again, balance of these are the hurdles, this is what's still here, but these are leaders. And so our young people get to go to conferences where they hear from people like Dee Watkins and Erica Green and, Erica Bridgeford, right? And people who locally are leaders leading in the midst of it. And so it really is, for me, this balance, because what I don't want is our students to feel like, look, there ain't no hope, everything's lost, right? But at the same time, not discredit the reality that they're living through, because they're living through the inequities on a regular basis.
So, Dr. Santelices, there are a couple of things that you pointed out and I wanted to kind of get your take on very quickly. One is, should we expect for there to be any changes or any additions made to the curriculum around about race in this country? Like, given the fact that when these students go home and they go home and they turn on the TV and they see these things happening on their screen, should school districts, Baltimore City and other school districts, start to include some sort of conversation, some sort of curriculum or teaching that's included with their social studies and math and reading and writing? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, when we're talking about this piece around identity, that's huge. That makes up, like, if a student can't see themselves in their educational experience, then and I know that they're going to be less enthusiastic about furthering along or trying to make the progress they need to make. So can you speak on those two things, the curriculum and how do we make sure that the student's identity isn't lost?
Yeah, no, and I think that one of the things we have to acknowledge is that there's a number of ways to get at that, Farajii, right? So there's one piece of it that is, I actually get to study the history of my community. And that's what I referenced earlier, right? In Black history classes, in making sure that even in elementary grades, students are reading a diversity of authors, right? Including those from their own community, as well as our Be More Me curriculum. I think the other piece to that, though, and I had a teacher in Baltimore City schools say this to me, that, the teaching, teaching in and of itself and she said at the time, give me any piece of work and I can help young people relate it to their lives. And this was a teacher that was Baltimore born, went to Baltimore City Public Schools. And this was a 7th grade class. And I'm just going to say it, right? This was a 7th grade class that was reading Chaucer at the time. But one of the things that she said was that the ability to take the universal themes that were in there and allow students to not just study it within the original context, but to take those themes and apply it to today's issues is also powerful. And I think that that's part of the problem, is that we, regardless of what the content is, right, we should be able to apply that content in ways that young people can say, well, you know what, if I were to translate that into my current context, this is what it would look like. So when we study conflict, when we study betrayal, when we study loyalty, are we only teaching it in the context of what was happening at the time it was written, or are we making those applications? When we study mathematics and social policy, are we using it only to examine issues that are away from, right, my daily life, or are we using it internal to my daily life? Like we had a couple of schools that looked at pH levels in water in Baltimore City and compared that to pH levels in other jurisdictions and other bodies of water. I would say that that is a lens into something that's seemingly not a Black history, but actually applies to students' current context and allows them to apply it to other contexts. So I do think it's a frame. It is about the content, and we're working on that. And I think families should expect that. And they should also expect that if their young people are reading Chaucer, they're able to see it within the context it was written, but then be able to critique it and apply it to their current situation. They're not separate, nor should they be.
All right, let's go bring in my culture crew, Lise Winnie, Iman Heath, as we talk to the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools, Dr. Sonia Santelises. Lise, Iman, what are your questions for the superintendent?
Good afternoon, ladies.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Iman, I'll start with you, sis.
So my first question, what do you think is causing the issue for the softening of talking about our history, Black history, the true history? Not why do you think it's being handled with cookie cutter type of just softness? We want to be as delicate as possible to speak about the issues. I'm seeing, of course, it may not be in Baltimore, but in Texas, the McGrill, I want to say McGrill or McHill textbook is changing slavery to we were indentured servants here. So why do you think this subject of what really happened to us as Black is being softened in school?
Well, I think it's being softened by political pressure. I think it's being softened by not actually taking the time to say, how do we teach these subjects well? So a lot of what I've seen as backlash, like when people hold this up, is this is a horrible example, right? Like there was one example of a class in, I think it was Virginia, where, they had all the white children act as slaves, and then, those families were in uproar. But I could pull out examples of when Black children were taught to simulate the Underground Railroad, and somebody said run, and they were supposed to simulate running. That to me is just bad teaching in both sections, and we're not calling out bad practice, which then gives people who have a political agenda the ability to say, see, this is what this does. And it's uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. People don't want to, they don't know how to wade through challenging topics that show the worst of human behavior towards other humans. And so it's easy to use those bad examples, right? And then basically use it in a political way instead of actually digging down deep and saying, how do we teach this well? And even when it's a hard topic, which we can do. I mean, there are other hard topics. I mean, we talk about mass genocide in a historical context, and we figure out a way to do it in a way that young people aren't traumatized. I think we have to put in the time and the energy, and there are folks who are using the inability to dig deep in what quality teaching of those tough subjects looks like, and instead use it as an opportunity to just sweep it off the table entirely.
And I think that's and to your point, Iman, I think that's the problem. Like I mean, Doc, you saying that that people have pretty much been influenced by political pressure, but that's like we're in 2022, and you can't talk about Black folks, you can't talk about Black history. You know what I'm saying? And we know Baltimore is a predominantly Black city, and unfortunately, we're still seeing some Black folks, Black leaders within the school system, Black teachers who are like, kind of like trying to, and I'm like, we make up 65% of the city in Baltimore, and in other cities across the country, we add to the tax base. We're foremost in shaping the culture. Why can't we talk about Black people and to Black students? Why is that such a problem? Or we can't talk about Black history to non-Black students when we have to learn everything else?
Well, but I think, Farajii, it comes down to one, not giving the ground, right? And just taking it away because it's uncomfortable. And I will tell you what, even when we were rolling out our Be More Me curriculum, and Dr. Tracy Durant, God bless her, came to me, said, Doc, before we roll out this curriculum, we're going to have to work with some of these teachers on their own issues, right? And difficulty around talking about race and difficult subjects. And that cut across both, a number of racial groups, by the way, right? We had Black teachers who weren't sure how to navigate this. And so we had to back up and say, we've got to have safe spaces for teachers to process where they are so that they're prepared to teach the curriculum. Because you can have it as a course of study and still have people leap over it, because you can't possibly see what's going on in every classroom across a city that teaches 79,000 people. So that's one thing we did, is we actually brought in our equity office and said, wait a minute, this is not just a regular curriculum rollout. We got to give teachers space to process this, or it won't get taught because it can be uncomfortable. And so we can't look at it as just, okay, if people would teach it, it would all go. No, I've watched some people botch some really good Black history and botch it, right? Because they can't process it. So for us, it's got to be both. And we almost made the same mistake a lot of people did. And fortunately, Dr. Durant kind of pulled us back and said, wait, we got to do some individual adult work before we talk about, just taking this to kids.
Absolutely. Lise, what's your question, your comment for Dr. Santelises?
I guess I have two separate questions on two separate issues. As you know, we're still in a pandemic, or we're actually coming to the end of it, or I guess in an endemic of COVID. COVID impacted schools for a very long time, and it had a lot of issues. What type of issues have you seen, I guess, with kids having that lack of 2 years? We had some children who left school with like a lack of communication, really, or face-to-face interaction. And I guess the second question that I have is about the safety. We've seen the atrocities that have happened recently in schools, and how has this impacted educators? And a lot of Republicans are floating the idea of teachers being armed. Is that something that you guys have thought about in Baltimore City?
So let me start out by saying no, we have not talked about arming teachers in Baltimore City, and I am thankful that I live in a city where that is not under discussion. I think what we have seen is exactly what you were saying, and we're not the only one, so I don't want to say it's only in Baltimore City. Absolutely, there was an increase in conflict, in violent response to conflict, and dare I say, we had a serious spike in adult involvement in that same behavior in schools, right? And so what I think that signals is that, whenever you have 2 years, when a community is separate and when relationships are frayed, right? What happens when you get everybody back in? And let me tell you, I was as mistaken as everybody else. And I said this, I took some teachers of the year finalists from Baltimore City to dinner last night. And I confessed to them, I said, I was thinking, great, if we could just get everybody back in, then the relationships will just come on back. But they didn't.
Right.
And we had to be deliberate about it. What we found was that the schools that knew how to build community, the schools that had the connections to home, got back on track, for lack of a better term, back into a healthy space faster. But 2 years out, we had young people. I had a community leader say to me, Doc, I hate to tell you this, but some of the kids coming back in after being away a year and a half have gotten involved in activity that they were not involved in prior to that, right? And that's negative activity, what I call criminal pipeline activity that we had to be deliberate about. But it has been hard. But the schools that focused and doubled down on relationships did the best job. I will say, full disclosure, we used to have optional, screening, metal detector screening for safety. And this spring, because of the severe spike in guns we were seeing around schools, on students in schools, we made for the remainder of the spring that mandatory. But one of the things that school leaders were telling us, and we knew, is that there's not just one solution, right? You can't just put up a metal detector and then just assume all of the quote violence is taken care of. In the same way, arming teachers, with all due respect to states who do, that's not going to take it away, right? It's a more holistic kind of approach where you've got to look at everything going on. So yeah, we can take, guns away from kids, and our school police officers do that all the time because of the relationship they have, not just because they had some easy off the hip, let's do this one thing and it'll go away. And we've got to be willing to roll up our sleeves and get into the complexity of why we're seeing this spike. It's not just one thing.
I want to take this time to get some comments from our watchers, Dr. Santelisa's. Folks have been checking in. Karina, I want to post a couple of these really quickly. Karina Denise said parents should also be taking the initiative to be involved in their child's education. And I saw another comment from one of our other watchers that said that parents need to show up at school board meetings and the necessary PTA meetings. What is the city schools, Baltimore City Public Schools, doing to engage and encourage parental involvement in this process?
Yeah, and I'm thankful for those two comments because it is key. We can't just do this as schools. And one of the things coming out of 18 months of virtual learning is we saw more parents had insight into what was going on with classrooms, right? They saw it through their screen. They saw some of how their children were learning or not learning. And so part of what we've been trying to do through our family community engagement office is really use our community school coordinators at school to help link parents with some of the everyday needs, right? Because some of the needs are, a need for job placement, some of what you all were talking about before I came on in terms of a holistic approach. We see that in schools too. I mean, if you don't know where to get food, if you have, been evicted from your apartment and don't know where you're going in the evening, you're a lot less likely to be involved in your child's education. But that's not every student in city schools. And so some of it is doing a better job on our part of connecting with parents about what are the supports that are helpful. So believe it or not, over the last 2 years, one of the things, you would think it would have been obvious before, so shame on us, but just using cell phones for quick surveys with parents, the communication through texting to teachers. Even me and my own, children's teachers, the ability to get a text that says, Talia, one of mine, isn't on her office hours in the afternoon, actually made it easier for me sitting at work to then text her and say, how come you're not on, right, your after school hours? So we have a variety of needs. I think we have parents with acute needs that are kind of everyday life needs, but then we have parents who want to know, how can I help my students? So we had a number of parents who wanted to know, look, I know my child's behind in reading because they just didn't do well in virtual learning. Well, through the laptops that we had to buy, now parents can log on and actually see exercises themselves that they can have some control and agency with on getting their young people connected to those and not just relying on the schools. So there's a lot of ways, but the best way is really, yes, as one of your viewers said, is show up at those meetings. So when it's budget time and what you think your school needs, show up for the parent budget meeting, during the parent open houses, and also school board meetings, because the school board does listen when there's a trend among parents of things that they want to see. And that's important. You don't have to come to everyone, but now that they're virtual, you can look and see while you're cooking dinner. You don't have to actually come down. You can actually kind of keep track, and the board does monitor what the letters are that come in. So I think that's a bunch of different ways, but that we can always do more.
Absolutely. Lana checked in, one of our loyal watchers. She said, what about recruiting at HBCUs? Why are 70% of school teachers white in a majority Black city? Speaking of Baltimore, Dr. Santelises, what is that the correct number, or is there a different number?
Yeah, no, we actually have a higher percentage of teachers that are Black, and I think we're close to half. I will check, but we're definitely higher than 30%. We actually have one of the highest percentages, for obvious reasons, I would hope, in the state, but we can always do more. One of the things we found, though, to Lana's point, is we had less of an issue with recruiting Black teachers and more of an issue retaining Black teachers. And so our Black teacher work group has done, and really it started before COVID, in really researching, okay, what are the reasons Black teachers are leaving? And what we saw was that a lot of those reasons were similar to what we see nationally, right? So where are the leadership opportunities? Being frankly overworked, because many of them could relate to students, and so they got more assignments, but not necessarily all the promotion that went with that. So we really worked with that teacher work group to say, these are some things we can do, and we've actually stabilized our Black teacher retention. But we are working with HBCUs. I will give a shout out. It's not just Black teachers. We need Black school psychologists. Everybody is saying, oh, you need to hire more school psychologists and more social workers. Well, let me tell you something. If I'm hiring psychologists and social workers who still don't know how to relate to our young people, then it's a waste of money, right? So we are also working with Deb Brooks, who heads up that division. It has actually partnered with 2 HBCUs, specifically Coppin and Eastern Shore, to be able to have a pipeline from college level, intern level, graduate level, to get more social workers, school psychologists of color, and from Baltimore City in our schools. And one of our councilmen, Zeke Cohen, the other night, along with 2 of our delegates, Stephanie Smith, Delegate Ampry as well, are really working to say, what are the state pipelines to incentivize more Black college students and more Black students in high school to also go into these fields in education as well. So I would say it's teachers, and it's those folks who give that frontline mental health support too. We need them in all those areas.
Jay Thompson checked in, Dr. Santelises, and she said, the problem is the debt teachers incur for low pay. Where are we on that conversation of raising teacher wages? And because there are so many, you know it and I know it, there has been so much expectation that teachers play all of these roles, and then they're still getting subpar pay. Like in certain places around this country, teachers are only getting paid $35,000-$40,000. And yet they are now dealing with the challenges from mental health issues to students, to possibly having a mass shooting occur to their school, to other, administration issues. Where are we, and then they go into debt. And I think this is a tragedy and a travesty in this country, that the people that are shaping the minds and the futures of the next generation are incurring debt because they simply can't pay. They can't pay for their colleges. They can't pay for the bills, and their living situation is low. So what are we doing about that?
So one of the things that I'm proudest about in Baltimore City, and again, I had dinner last night with 17 Teachers of the Year finalists, and they verified for me that Baltimore City actually pays pretty well. It doesn't mean our teachers don't deserve more increases or any of that, but compared to a lot of our neighboring jurisdictions, our starting salary is similar or in range, but really what we've done with our contract that happened probably 10 years ago now is actually give teachers the opportunity to increase their pay through what they do, right? So it is taking on extra responsibilities, enrolling in extra professional development, doing those kinds of leadership pieces that do keep us competitive. But you are absolutely right. I have a colleague who's a superintendent in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and when she told me what her teachers made, I said, how do you keep anybody? Because teachers—
How much do they make, Doc?
Oh my God, it was like $30,000, Farajii. I was like, how does anybody?
In Oklahoma?
Yeah. Yeah, it was
For
bad.
a teacher, they make this $30,000.
It was in the 30 range. I'll have to talk. I think they got some increase,
but it wasn't more than 40. Either way, that's nothing.
It's nothing. Like even in Oklahoma, like you don't have to be in New York City to know it's nothing. And when she told me, I said, "How do you keep people?" Right? Because it's to your earlier point, and I think more loan forgiveness programs. I think paying for college students. College education who agree to teach for a certain number of years. I think we've got to open up all of those avenues, particularly if we want teachers from the neighborhoods of the young people we're serving, right? And so in some of those cases, those are first generation college goers, right? And so for them to take on debt actually shortchanges the generational substance that we want to be able to carry over because it's all taken over with the debt. So I think that's some of the things. I know the Meyerhoff program has done a great job in helping to incentivize teachers going into math and science. And I think we need to spread that to other areas. And I bet you in a couple of years, you watch when this national teacher shortage really takes hold, then we're going to have to do that because folks are leaving the profession at a high rate. And that's true in the state of Maryland. We import more teachers than we produce in the state of Maryland. And my colleagues are feeling it, and they will tell you it is a topic in every superintendent's meeting.
Well, that's why I think that I'm an advocate of, if you are a teacher, if you went to school for education, you should not have student loan debt.
Agreed.
That should be the first. Like, you should not have student loan debt. Lisa, I know you got a question for Dr. Santelises. What's your question, sis?
I mean, most of it is sort of answered. My question was about the teacher shortage, and not just shortage with teachers, but we've noticed, of course, with social workers, which is just a shortage in general, but also bus drivers. My question was, how do we get the new generation to be excited, not just about education, but actually teaching education? Because there's not as many children now that are interested in actually becoming teachers as once was. And it kind of was answered, like student loan forgiveness and things of that nature. So my question was kind of answered.
Okay. Yes. No, and awesome. I think also starting at the high school level, which is another thing we're doing to kind of capture young people's interest early.
Absolutely. Iman, you got another question for Doc?
Yes, I have one last question. So you did bring up how we need to get parents need to be more involved as far as showing up to board meetings and whatnot, just to have that issues resolved. Another issue I'm sure is probably a hot topic there, is getting air conditioning in these Baltimore City schools. There have been any issues since I was in an elementary school, which was well over 20 years ago. So what is hindering, or what is the hiccup that is slowing down the process, stops the process? Is it funding? Is it local officials? Or is it parents not showing up? Like what is the holdup on getting air conditioning in the Baltimore City schools? Because they have testing, and those tests can be stressful. I took those HSAs, and I know it's probably even worse now. So how can we get air in Baltimore City schools?
So great question. First thing I would say is, when I started in this position, we had 75 schools that had no air conditioning. Now, 5 years later, we have 19, and we are on track. We submitted a plan to the governor maybe 4 years ago, saying, based on funding, right, this is when we feel like we can get it done. And we are on track for that. So it's still 19 too many. We still have some that have air conditioning that we're going to need to replace because they're so old. But I think the good news is we're making progress, and we're on track to have that number even lower this year. But we have been on time with our plan. And so it is a shout out, to your point. It's a shout out to parents, community activists who lobbied at the state level and not only got us Kerwin dollars, but it was our legislators, particularly some from Baltimore City, who pushed alongside advocates and parents and got us additional funding. So right now we're on track. It looks like, now with the supply chain, I'm hoping that holds because COVID has impacted that. And I'm hoping that the prices don't go up too much. But, we've had a 30% increase in construction prices over the last year. So as long as all that holds, we actually should have air conditioning in every school according to our plan within the next year and a half.
And most of that money, for those who don't know, Doc, the money for infrastructure, and I don't know if this is the case for other districts around the country, but for money for infrastructure improvement, I guess, I know that sometimes the city will categorize those improvements or those as capital projects. But is that money coming out directly from the operating budget for the school system, or where does that money come from? Explain to us, if you can, in about 30 seconds,
where
that money is coming from.
Sure. So 30 seconds, it's a combination of state dollars that tend to be pretty consistent across the state, but the biggest differential is local dollars. So Baltimore City puts in about 19% of its budget for capital dollars that yields us about 19 million, not its whole budget. If you compare that to our neighboring, more suburban jurisdiction, Baltimore County, they put in 113 million per year. So that difference, that $100 million difference is the backlog of capital issues in city schools that we've been working to rectify. And frankly, Farajii, you will see some version of that in a number of urban school districts like Detroit, like Philly, my colleagues in other places. And so that's why a lot of us are using the ESSER dollars to do things like air conditioning here in Baltimore City. We're using some of the ESSER funds to put in 28 new bathrooms because the capital dollars are just, there's such a disparity at the local level that it leads to disparity in the physical environment for kids.
Wow. Dr. Sonia Santelices, your time with us has been very, very well spent. So we thank you so much for being with us this afternoon to talk about these issues. And, as I mentioned to all of our leadership that come onto the platform, that when there are some improvements, some updates, we would love to bring you back on to answer more questions from our viewers and our panel. So thank you for your time.
Thank you all for having me. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. You too. Folks, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about the Monique and DL Hughley feud that continued this week, even after the whole debacle about contract and headlining shows had ended, and how things can just go too far. We'll have that conversation up next, so stay with us. It's The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
It's time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punches! Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on there.
Stay black. I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared. You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the Culture here on the Black Star Network. All right, I wanted to talk about this situation between comedian Monique, comedian actress, Oscar-nominated actress Monique, and comedian and talk show host DL Hughley. Now, last week, they had a whole feud about contract or headlining a comedy show. But then, you know, it was like all this social media back and forth, and Monique pull out her receipts and DL pull out his receipts. But essentially, what ended up happening was Monique was the headliner for the show and all of that. But then, and I want to bring in my culture crew back, and these are two dynamic women, Lise Winnie, Iman Heath. Let's bring them back into it. Here's the part I don't understand, ladies. Monique took this situation to a whole nother level. When she recently posted over the weekend this feud, and during this whole feud, she posted a radio interview where DL Hughley was talking about how people were having trouble believing Bill Cosby could have committed sexual assault, sexual harassment and assault. And so he went on to talk about how he had a difficult time believing that one of his close friends molested his youngest daughter. Now, this is an interview that DL Hughley did a couple of years ago. Monique reposted this interview. And Lisa, I'm not quite clear as to why a situation that once talked about contracts now ended up talking about something very traumatic like molestation. Why she reposted this interview, her reasoning, according to her, and you know, she said she wanted to, I guess, provide a safe space or to talk about how DL is to kind of do like a character assassination of him as a man and as a comedian. So she brought this all of this information about this very tragic experience that his youngest daughter had with his friend to put it out there. I'm kind of like blown away by the whole thing, because as a result of that, DL Hughley's oldest daughter sent out, and Keenan, let's post that again for us, please, brother. She had this major post, folks. If y'all didn't see this, DL Hughley's older daughter responded to Monique in this much longer post talking about why Monique is just a low person, a low character person to pull out something so traumatic that has impacted the Hughley family to make a point about the type of man that DL Hughley is. Lise, can you speak to this? Because this sounds much bigger and much more traumatic than just talking about comedy.
Yeah, and I think that this is what happens when you get someone who often puts themselves in like this martyr situation. And this is the only thing. And, you know, she's a Baltimore native. You know, shout out to all Baltimore natives. But I got to speak it the way I see it. And it seems like a lot of time in these situations, she always says that she's speaking for women or Black women, when a lot of the times it seems like, no, you're actually speaking for you. Because when there are things that are going on, Monique is mostly silent unless it directly impacts her. And in this particular situation, I think in her trying to prove she was the victim so much that she re-victimized a victim. At no point should you have ever done that or put that out there, because you have no idea what mental state that his daughter is in and whether or not she's actually processed this. And it doesn't equate to the two. It doesn't make you right on this contract issue by you putting that out there. And I think that, just looking at it, Black Twitter and everything has spoken that they're not having this, and this was not okay for Monique to do this. And his daughter, oldest daughter, did say, if you want to come sit down, it's an open invitation. And Monique accepted that invitation only on DL Hughley's show.
Right, on DL's show, not like face to face the way the daughter said that she wanted the invitation. She didn't say come to a public space. She was saying come see me.
Right.
In a private conversation.
Yes, it's unacceptable. It is unacceptable.
It's unacceptable. And I'm wondering, and to your point, Lise, it feels like nobody wins in a situation like this, right? Like, if it really does feel like it's one thing when you talk about contracts. It's one thing when you talk about, that type of stuff. But the moment you start to put out a family or a person's trauma, one, that's triggering.
Mm-hmm.
Two, but
isn't this her issue with Oprah though? This was her issue with Oprah. Oprah re-traumatized Monique by bringing her brother on the show, who supposedly had molested Monique. So it just does not make any sense why she would do this at all.
All I can think of, and I'm gonna let you. All I'm gonna think of, Iman, real quick: hurt people.
I admire Monique's resilience and her persistence to get her point across. And if she,
you sound real. Wait a minute, hold on.
No, hold on.
You sound so political, yo.
Wait a minute.
You sound so political.
You like how I said?
I admire her resilience. Come on, Monique. That was low.
But it's. I'm trying to understand, like, why. Like, it's not really a safe space you're creating. I wish she wouldn't have did this, because I support her as a person and just her grind to be heard through all circumstances. But it's like with this one, like, you gotta know you touched a button that shouldn't have been touched. Are you saying that maybe DL Hughley doesn't, I don't know, provide a safe space for his children? Are you like, what story are you trying to spin? But like, why? The situation with the headline, who's headlining the show? This safe space you're trying to create isn't going to provide that answer. So it's like, wow, like, come on, Mo, come on. Please don't be this person.
Come on, my babies.
Come on, my babies.
Come on, y'all, my loves. My loves.
Yes, bring it in, my babies. No.
I mean, look, I get it. You know what I'm saying? Like, Black women, y'all are the most disrespected people on the planet. I get it. Especially when it comes to your creativity, your talents. You are overlooked in so many different ways, right? Especially in the entertainment industry. I get that. What I hate seeing Black people going to war with each other in a very, very public way, right? And contracts is one thing. Family trauma. There should be some boundaries.
Some things should be off limits.
That's off limits. Like that's his youngest daughter. Like the man said in his interview, and I had to talk to my wife about this. DL Hughley had to admit, he admitted, he didn't have to, but he admitted in an interview, folks, that his youngest daughter, let me share with you this quote. It blew me away. And I felt his pain. Because he was talking about Bill Cosby. He said, the reason it hit home to me is because my youngest daughter said something happened to her, and because it was somebody I liked, I didn't believe her. And I'll never get that moment back. I'm supposed to protect her, and I'll never get that back. That she told her father something, and he didn't do something about it because it was inconvenient.
Maybe that's.
I mean, as a daughter of a girl, I mean, as a father of a girl, if my daughter tells me a situation like that happened, I'm going to believe her. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard that as a man, as a black man who has a father, who has a daughter, like, you know, he must have been crushed to not only admit that, but to find out that really happened, like that was actually true, like his daughter wasn't making a story.
Yeah, and I think that Monique was trying to say that he doesn't protect black women. I think that's where she was going with that. But I think that this is not how you do this. It does not equate to the two. And I think him even talking about it shows that he does want to rectify the wrong. Like, he admits that I was wrong in that situation, and that is something that should have never happened. So I don't know why Monique thought that this was going to get people on her side, and why this was going to make people have that aha moment about DL Hughley, because although DL Hughley has said stuff about Monique in the past, like when asked, because he's in the media, so that's his job, like we're talking now, I think that he never said anything about her children. He never brought her children into this situation at all. She'd already said that she feels sorry for his wife because she doesn't know how. I'm gonna be careful with how I phrase this.
Right.
Is with a coward. Let's just say that is with a coward. So, you know, I think that she does need to watch her words. And there's a way for you to, if you claim to be about black women, you cannot bring another black woman's trauma in order to prove your point. That makes you also.
Hold up. Woo!
Yes, sir.
Tell it to the reality show stars.
Right. You cannot. Yes, I agree with it. You just cannot do that. My trauma is not for your amusement or to prove a point for you. You are causing me more pain. You cannot be on the side and say that I am your champion and then hurt me at the same time. Damn. We cannot have that happen, Monique. This is unacceptable, and you should apologize publicly. You said it publicly, you should apologize publicly, because since you want the attention anyway, because I would have had this conversation with his daughters privately if I were going to have this conversation, but she wants to have it on air for whatever reason. So I am very disappointed. I am so disappointed in Monique at this point.
I'm disappointed. Here's the thing, and his eldest daughter name is Ryan Nicole Shepherd. And in her post, where she blazed Monique, blazed her, folks. And it's such a long post, I'm not going to be able to read it. But one of the things she said was, "You now publicly disrespected my mother, who I love and care for very much, and my baby sister, who I love and care for very much, to get back at my father. At this point, I feel like you are asking my family and myself to act out of character." She said, this is the part that got me. She said, out of all the things you could have legitimately said about my dad, if that's the route you wanted to take, you chose to be deliberately mean and hurtful to two Black women who have nothing to do with this conversation.
Yes. 1,000.
And if y'all listen to D, I actually like DL Hughley. I listen to his show
I
and
do
all
too.
of that stuff.
You should get him on here. You should bring him on here.
I got some questions.
Let me just say, I actually like DL Hughley, right? And I think that DL Hughley is just one of those brothers who had to evolve into a certain level of consciousness, right? And so we can never, one of the things that I've learned as I've gotten older is that you can't make a judgment, an accurate judgment on any person's life until their story is completely told, i.e. until death comes, right? Because people change, people evolve, people over time, things happen that will force you and compel you to think differently about a person or a circumstance or something. So that's one of the things. But when Ryan Nicole said that, out of all the things you could have legitimately said, DL Hughley said he cheated. DL Hughley said he was a certain type of man. Like, he admits to all of these things. So I thought it was interesting. His eldest daughter is saying, you could have said a lot of bad, you could have legitimately said some stuff about my dad.
I got this backfiring. I got it backfiring on her. Because now what you're saying, Farajii, how he has now evolved into this different person, a more mature person with different perspective. This may highlight how much, I'm not going to say better of a person, but just highlight how much he's grown in a positive way. Like, I really think this is going to, she tried to dig a hole for him, but she's now dug a hole even further for herself, because this is going to show how much he has grown. And as he's probably going to reiterate, if he does decide to have this conversation, that yes, I admitted to all of that in the past, but that's my past. I'm moving on forward, and Monique, you seem to be stuck in the past. So this is about this is about to fire back on Monique.
Now, here's the thing, though. I agree with you. And at this point, it's like, Monique, why are you still trying to stoke the fire when you just got back into the good graces with your relationship with, was it Lee Daniels and Tyler Perry, right?
This Lee Daniels. I don't know if
Just
Tyler Perry.
She did say that Tyler Perry, she got Tyler Perry on a recording, said that he regrets treating her the way he did.
Okay.
But the point is, she's just kind of getting her mojo back. She's about to do some other stuff. She got some new projects that she's working on. Like, sister, why are you trying to do that? Like, and again, going back to it, hurt people, man. Like, sometimes you don't know you toxic until a circumstance. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like if you're in a relationship, whether you're a man or woman, you might be like, man, she toxic, he toxic, right? But you keep, in every relationship, it just falls apart. It just explodes, right? After a while, you got to start asking, well, damn, are they all toxic? Or is it
me? Is it me?
Like, I'm toxic as fuck. Like, damn.
Yeah, it's like when you smell something bad and you walk in a room, and then when you walk out the room, you still smelling it. And it's like, after a while you go, is it me? Like you have to figure that out. And we have seen this happen time in and time again with Monique, with situations that kind of fall down. And she says the same thing everywhere she goes. And I know that a lot of people are saying, but hey, look, Monique has really stood up for Black women, and she's, really standing out. But my thing is, and I could be completely wrong, and tell me if I am, I don't know if I've ever heard her stand up for anyone but herself. Like, when she's saying I'm not getting paid, it was because she didn't get paid at Netflix. It wasn't that she came out again and said, hey, well, I'm going to come out and say that, Leslie Jones didn't get paid enough, or Wanda Sykes didn't. Right. I've never seen her do that.
That is true.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to be an advocate, you got to be an advocate for all, not just for yourself. I mean, that's just one of the things. But I think that, and I'm just saying, in the court of public opinion, like you know, I mean, when you are a celebrity, that yeah, a situation might be one way behind closed doors, but in the court of public opinion, if that situation comes across a certain way to the people as either a good thing or a bad thing, it's hard to sway public opinion. It's very, very hard to sway. That's in the court of public. That is the hardest court to present your case, because once we hear this and that and we put it together, we like, that person is terrible.
That's it. That's really all.
And then you could be like you could feed the poor. You can save babies from fires and all of that. If we don't see it, if nothing new has come up in the court of public opinion to prove that you are a better person, a changed person, guess what? We're just going to keep that one view about it. Is it fair? No. Is it right? No. But it's just the way the court of public opinion works. It's like you got to replace the old view with something new and better. And Monique, I think she was just she was just getting back into the graces of people. And I think she's going to lose a lot of black women women support and a lot of black folks support. I don't think people are going to come up. If she did a stand-up a special on Netflix within the next year, people are going to be like, oh, that's whatever.
I mean, now, yeah, after putting this woman's trauma back in the limelight, she's going. I hope not, but like you said, the court of public opinion, she's going to lose her support, especially from the African Americans. Like, she's not because I'm one of them, but she's going to. Yeah, I said the African American.
I did it too.
Right. So she just we know, and like we can't omit it because people already know she had some shots, some words for the big guy, Roland Martin. Mm-hmm. Didn't work out well. Did not work out well. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I'm saying. Like, you want to take shots at people. I think even 50 Cent weighed in on the whole controversy. He was like, you need to fix that. Now, when 50 Cent, King Petty himself, King is Provocateur himself, start to say, I think you need to handle that. I think you need to resolve this peacefully.
Yeah,
you went too far.
Right. I mean, and what he told her was, because he's putting on BMF. That's one of her opportunities. And he told her, the best thing you can do to get back at somebody that you feel like have been wronged is to live a good life. To do good, do good. And I'm just like, really? 50? What? I don't know.
The best
friend said that.
She said that. That's what she said.
Well, and 50, of course, he gone through his battles with personalities and stuff. But the thing is that we just know that's part of his action. I don't think he doesn't care. I mean, he just doesn't care.
That's the point. Right? Like, he doesn't.
He just doesn't care. He's just like, whatever. You know what I mean? I'm gonna sell vitamin water and I'm gonna do shows and I'm gonna move on. You know what I'm saying? But for her, I think she's trying so hard to get into this place of being like this voice for black women, which she can be. She's trying so hard, but it becomes so messy. Oh my God, it does.
Messy. And it's unfortunate with her and DL Hughley, because really, I think DL handled it right. I'm not going to say this because I'm a bigger, if I'm being transparent, a bigger DL Hughley fan than I am a Monique fan. But I think that he handled it right, where he said the issue was with the promoters. Like, it wasn't for you to come out and put this on. Like, that was unnecessary. I know you were frustrated by this, but the issue is with the promoters. And that is where this should have stayed and not brought to the audience.
I don't know why they didn't think. I thought the exact same thing when I read the story. I was like, well, why are y'all going back and forth? Why are you not talking to the people that putting the show on?
Right. Get them.
Like, why you give him a deal memo and give me a contract? Like, what we doing here? Because the math and the contract ain't contract.
Oh, no, she wrote that contract. It came from her media company, her management company.
Oh, that was her manager.
Her, yes.
And the plot thickens.
Right. Look, I just think at the end of the day, when we look at not just that deal, but I'm always thinking about the human element of this. The little sister that was put on blast. I'm talking about his youngest daughter, the oldest daughter, Ryan, blasting Monique. Like, you got to do what you got to do with your family, man. Like, I'm not mad at the oldest daughter. No, not at all. Not mad at all. Because I would have done the same thing. Like, all right, sis, enough is enough. You going way too far. And if you start pulling up people's drama, hey, look, like she said, what you trying to do, force us to get out of character? You're in a day and age where people will run up on a stage and smack you in your face.
Literally.
And I mean, that's just the day and age. You traveling around the country, you making jokes, you making all these threats, you talking all this big talk. You don't. Everybody always believe they can never be caught slipping, as they say in the street, right? You can't catch me. Everybody can get got.
Yeah, Mike Tyson said it best. Everybody think they can fight till they get hit in the face.
And you last thing we need to see for the culture, two black women smacking on each other.
Right. Or a black man and a black woman going back and forth. It's not good for the culture.
It's not good for the culture, man. But it's hard being a black comedian today. It's hard being a black comedian. All right, Lise Weddy, host of Millennials Anonymous podcast. Thank you so much, Lise. Iman, I love the camera. I love the view. I love the sound that you got now.
You see how upgraded?
Her camera is crisp, baby. When I tell you crispy, right. You crisp.
Your teeth are whiter, your skin is browner.
Thank you so much.
And your speech is just more pro-black. Thank you so much.
That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for.
Appreciate y'all for being so good for the culture. Folks, that's going to do it for us. Thank y'all for each and every one of you for being a part of the conversation. Make sure y'all show y'all support for Black Star Network. We went a little bit over time, but we got started a little bit late. But we thank you for riding with us every moment of this show. Make sure y'all show y'all support for BlackStarNetwork.com. Make sure you show your support for Black-owned media. We're unfiltered and unadulterated. And, of course, we are unapologetically Black, talking about the issues. More importantly, not just talking about the issues, but more importantly, we want to kind of pull the lessons so that we can learn something from these issues that we can hold on to so we can become better people. So certainly a big thing. Look, I'm keeping my eyes open on what's happening in California. If you are out there in California, Los Angeles, woo, boy, I can't wait to see what the end result of this election will be tonight. Oh, my goodness. So we're going to talk about that. Also, tomorrow, we're going to be checking in with the mayor of Beaumont, Texas. We're going to be talking to Madam Mayor Robin Montour about what's going on in Beaumont, Texas tomorrow. So we'll have that conversation. Thursday, I can just let you know that the January 6th hearing, first public hearing, will be kicking off 8 o'clock prime time. So on Thursday, we got to talk about what we saw on that faithful day, January 6, 2021. We'll have that conversation. And then Friday, we're going to have our love professional, Miss LaDawn Black, talk to us about this whole Lori Harvey, Michael B. Jordan situation, because there's more to just two people breaking up. Y'all know it is. Y'all know how I am. It's more to the story that I think that we can learn from. We can all learn from. So we'll have that conversation about love and relationships with her later on. So just giving you a breakdown of what the week is going to look like. Fantastic week. You don't want to miss a minute. And of course, we encourage you to stay tuned at 6 o'clock for Eastern Standard Time for our big brother. Ooh, my microphone there. Big brother Roland Martin is going to be checking in Eastern Standard Time. So make sure y'all tune into Roland Martin Unfiltered. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Talk to you soon. Peace.